Welcome to the Intentional Man Podcast, a podcast that inspires and equips Christian men to live intentionally, pursue God-sized goals, and build lives of significance. I'm your host, Jonathan McGinley, a Maxwell certified life coach, speaker, and trainer, and the founder of Intentional Man. In this podcast, you will hear inspiring stories, learn helpful life practices, and gain valuable insights on how to grow into the man God has made you to be. Welcome and enjoy the show. Hey, and welcome back to the Intentional Man Podcast. I'm excited to be here with you. Today's going to be fun. This is a guy that I met recently, and he's one of those guys that it was like the first time we met, I felt like we were like best friends. It was like one of those moments where you just connect and you click, and you're like, this is a guy that I want to be in my life. So Justin Boling, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Humbled by that comment, and I'm stoked, man. I'm excited. Yeah, like you said, we've kind of known each other on and off for a while, I feel like, and gotten to know each other pretty good, I would say, over the last little while, man. So I'm stoked, man, and humbled.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, we were talking about how we've realized we've been in the same room so many different times, but never really actually connected. It was like, this dude looks familiar. I've heard his name. Yeah. But we just recently connected at a business advisory group, and I just love the way you carry yourself, the way you live your life. You know, one of the things about Justin that's actually awesome is this is just a guy who loves to help and promote other people. I just want to say that right off the bat, man. I just really appreciate that about you, is like, you just have this abundance mindset of like, there's no competition. You just love to help people. Right away when he met me, he's, helping me with my business, telling people about it. So dude, just thank you for doing that. I love that. That's how you carry yourself. That comes through, obviously. So I look up to that in a lot of ways, for sure.
Cool, man. Well, it's good to hear. It's definitely a value, and it's something that you can allow. I mean, you could allow it to negatively affect you, but why, man? It's a big world, man. You're trying to grind and do the same things as everybody else. And if I can help you, man, that makes me feel good and sleep better at night. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you do it well, and it's inspiring. I love it. So, yeah, good. Justin is he's been an entrepreneur. He's been in the business world. He just helped grow a business in the pet industry. Really scaled that thing like crazy. He was a high-level executive. They just sold that company, and so after that, he's taken some of the principles he learned and some of those things, and now he is an EOS implementer. Just kind of started that business. Just tell us what that is really quick so people know what that means.
Yeah, so we work directly with entrepreneurs and small businesses. So EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And we work with those people from the aspect of like really helping them get what they want out of the business, and doing that through kind of really three things that we say: vision, traction, and health. And vision is really just getting their leadership team on the same page with where they're going and how they're going to get there, and then instilling the accountability and the discipline into the business through the traction, right? That's where you start to get the wheels on the ground and see what's happening in the business. But that vision then comes alive every day. And then healthy, man, just from the aspect of a lot of what we'll be talking about today too, of like a lot of leadership teams aren't healthy, right? They're not open and honest, and they have issues, and to talk about those and to really get on the same page is a lot of what we do. And yeah, we saw the fruits of that in a business I was a part of, and now I get to do that on a regular basis, man, and it gives me more life than I ever thought it would. So I'm excited to talk about that or whatever, man. I'm open book.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so EOS, I love EOS. I got introduced to it through Justin, and there's a book called Traction, which kind of goes hand in hand with this, which I went and read probably in like 3 days, I think, after we talked. And it was like, this is just, if you're a business owner, you should definitely read this book, and then you should hire Justin. But you should read this book. It's one of the most practical business books that I've seen, of just like, here's how you run a meeting. Here's how you set some goals. This is how you get clarity on your vision, all these things that are huge. And for me, it was like, man, if I just follow these steps, I know that my business will be operating in a great way. So Justin then takes those principles and helps actually implement them into businesses, help them make sure that they're doing these principles and just helping organize the vision and all that stuff. Maybe you can speak into it a little more, exactly what you do with those elements.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's really taking what you said, right? Like people read this book and I encourage people to read it. If you want it, I'll send it to you. You can find me on LinkedIn, whatever. Like it's what we say a lot is it's simple, but it's not easy, right?
Yeah,
like you and I
for
talked
sure.
about this, right? When you read it, you're like, oh, this is so simple. But then to like have the discipline and be able to do it and to continuously do it, like plain and simple, we're not all genetically coded to do all of those things, right? So that's where somebody like myself can come in and really start to teach and facilitate, not consult, right? And teach purely those tools and those aspects to the business, and the business can then run on those things. And man, it's honestly, it's so fun, man. Like I'm so curious about business and life in general. Like I get to talk to people like you, or I was talking to a guy today down in Southern Colorado who has a manufacturing business, and like he's walking through the book and trying to understand it, and he's just like, they get to this point in you're growing a business and you hit a wall, right? You hit a ceiling, right? Now what do I do? Like one of my clients, I hit $2 million 3 years in a row. They're super frustrated. Right. And so, okay, let's take a step back, and you start to walk through these simple conversations and these practical tools. And like you said, you start to outline your vision and your core values, things that we skip as entrepreneurs because we don't have time, right? Dude, we're trying to live life or pay the bills. We don't have time to discuss core values, but they're so integral then to how you're growing that business and making it happen. And yeah, that's the quick version, but man, it's a ton of fun, man. And I could talk about it all day.
Which is awesome. And that's why you're in it. You're passionate about it, which is great. So, dude. Yeah, it's so cool. The thing I wanted to talk to Justin about today and bring you guys in on this conversation is he's taken a lot of these principles from business and through EOS and Traction and applied them to his life, which I just think is really cool. And he's taken the time to work on getting clear on, where his family's going, where his life is going, what are your core values, things like that. So that's what I want to talk about today, and just have you provide some insight on how we can do that, why it's important. So let's just jump in on that. In the book Traction, there's something called the VTO. And you have made a personal VTO. So tell us what that is and kind of the elements involved and how you did it for your life.
Yeah. So the VTO stands for Vision Traction Organizer. So it's a 2-page document, right? And in a business setting, how we utilize that is there's 8 questions on that document, and we walk through with the leadership team. And it's things like, what are your core values, right? What is your marketing strategy? Not marketing plan. What's your strategy? Target market, psychographic, demographic, all those kind of things. And you align on all of those things, right? But the big kicker in this, and then I'll switch this to the personal side, is like, what's your 10-year target, right? And this can be shorter, can be longer, but like, what is that thing? Whether it's a number, whether it's number of franchises, whether it's number of employees, whatever that target in 10 years, you want to be at this. Getting your team aligned on that and on every section of this is the key to that. So the top portion's the vision, the bottom is the traction. The personal side of that is there is a personal version of this, right? Your personal life is not necessarily run the same as a business, right? There's aspects to it from a discipline standpoint. And the example of this I like to use, the questions are a little different, is I did it with my 12-year-old. So I have 5 kids. My second oldest is 12, and he is a massive basketball fan, huge Giannis fan. We took him to see the Bucks a couple weeks ago here in Denver.
All right.
And in that process where he's like, yeah, I want to be in the NBA. Okay. So we sat down and we did this, and I'm asking him these simple questions. And I'm like, hey, where do you want to be in 10 years? He's 12. So he thinks about it, and he goes, he Googles, well, what is the average age of an NBA rookie? Well, it's about 21. So the light bulbs start going off for him, right? Of like, okay, I've got a lot to do between now and then. Like, I should be in the NBA in 10 years, right? So he starts to plan backwards, and then we get to there's a 3-year section, and he starts to go, man, 3 years, I'm going to be in high school. I should be on varsity or JV. Well, I should be fit enough to run a mile and a half at any moment, right? He starts to plan out these things that help him get there. So the personal side of that, right? It allows us in our own life, whether that's to have the number one podcast in the world, Jonathan, or if it's, to have a successful business, whatever it is, we have to voice that out, right? And then through these steps, then we can start to take the dream and make it a reality then, because in the bottom of that, the traction side, right? That's then where we take what we call the 90-day world, right? So take my son as an example. 10 years wants to be in the NBA. 3 years he's going to be in high school. Okay, within that then, 1 year you're going to be what? Okay, I'll be in 7th grade. He can now play on the school team, right? And to do that, so now you see, like now he can then, in the next 12 months thing, what do you need to do? Oh, it makes it really practical even for a 12-year-old to say, I need to probably shoot 100 shots a day. I need to run X number of miles a day. I need to do whatever, right, to set his goal that helps him reach X, Y, or Z. You know what I'm saying? And it's, dude, and that was super cool. And that's why I share that story. Like, to walk through that with a 12-year-old shows that it's simple. It's not easy to do any of those things, right? You and I talked about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's great. I love that. I mean, it is super practical. It is easy in theory, but harder to implement. The thing that's so cool about starting with the vision is then you actually can break it down to where your activities are moving you towards where you want to go. And I think we hear that all the time from people who are so busy, overwhelmed, working multiple hours, and then you get to the end of your week and you're like, man, I don't feel like I actually moved my life forward. That's what's cool about starting with, the end in mind, is that you can see what's important and then break it down. And that's where the process is really cool. So how have you seen that positively impact your life, starting with the vision for your life and then working backwards? How has that looked for you?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is a year ago, January, my wife and I were sitting and we had just started this kind of process. We did other processes, but we had never used this document. And I was kind of all in from a work standpoint, and we were trying to transition it to a family standpoint. And we sat there and we were like 10 years. Okay, like where are we going to be? Our oldest at that point was about to be 12. And so we were like, man, 10 years, he could be graduated college and he could be married.
In the NBA.
Yeah. Right. Like, and we were just like, man, like it really made us think differently. Right. Like it simplified the time frame. Like 10 years in one aspect can seem so far away, but when you put it in certain aspects of like 10 years, I could have a child who has graduated college and is married. Whoa. I have 10 summers. I have, however you want to look at that, right, to impact their life before they may not ever be in my home again, before I'm just hoping they come home for Christmas, right? Like, and that really for us, we sat in silence for a couple minutes and we were just like, we've got to make changes now to impact our family, to get where we want to get, right? And to have, like you said, that vision allowed us that perspective to say, we have to change the way that we do our life. And for us, that was starting our own business and taking that step into that so that we could be more active with our family. So we could not be at the office from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. trying to send the last or first email, or sitting on PowerPoint emails or meetings, every day and wasting time, like actually doing things that matter to us and growing our family and growing our faith and growing our friendship circles, right? Like if you don't ask those vision questions, it's going to be 10 years from now and you're going to look back and you're going to have regrets. Right. And I think any of us would say, if we look back and we have a regret, we try to avoid that feeling, right? Because that's not a great feeling. What if I would have done X, Y, or Z? And, you know, for us, the family side of that was a non-negotiable. And so it was pretty easy once we realized it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that a lot of regret could come from lack of vision, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't think we usually think of it that way. It's usually like, man, I messed up in that moment. and did this. But I think that's an interesting thing to think about, how many of our regrets in life came because we didn't take the time to get clear about where we wanted to go and who we wanted to be in the process. I think that was a cool thing that you just mentioned with your wife, is that we're like, man, we need to change. We need to become more intentional parents. We need to pour in our kids and invest time and stuff. That's who we need to become in order to see our kids thrive in 10 years. So I love that. So do you have a personal VTO for yourself and then you have a family one too? Or did you just do one together with your wife?
Yeah, so we have a family one, and then I have an individual one, and then I have a business one. So I have three that I look at on a regular basis, and it seems like a lot, and it is to a certain extent, but at the same point, it's like, if I don't do that, my life, I feel like, is out of control, right? And so disciplining my life in this way, from a 10-year standpoint down to what am I going to do in the next 90 days, to additionally, like taking it, like you and I have talked extensively about, how do I then schedule my day, right? To where I can get the right things done that are achieving my vision for my business, my personal life, my family. Like, how do I get those things done then on a daily basis? Like that's then where you have to, if you don't do the work on the high level, those small pieces, man, we're all going to miss them.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so important. I mean, and that's what's cool, is that you have clarity of where you're going in three specific areas: your personal life, your family, and your business. Now it's like, okay, I can deconstruct that and make sure that's this intentionality piece. When we're talking about living intentionally, who do you want to become? Where do you want to go? And then we have to do it on a daily basis and just be consistent. And if we do that, I love just thinking about, I think I'm different than a lot of people in this. I love to think about the legacy that my life is going to leave. Like at the end of my life, like looking back and being like, man, how did I impact people? What was the story of my life? And I think when we live from there, it impacts our day-to-day so much. When you can tap into that, you can tap into that vision, you can tap into the impact that you want to have. That's where a lot of this intentionality comes from. If I'm just going through each day, just kind of reacting to what's thrown at me and not sure exactly who I want to be, what I want to do, how people remember me, like, then my days are just kind of like, okay, whatever comes up is what I'm going to attack. And there's just such a shift, man, when you begin with the end in mind and then you deconstruct it back. So I love that you do that. Let's kind of take some of these elements. Let's just make this episode really practical for people, because this is so good. So let's just talk 10-year vision real quick. That seems hard to put together sometimes. Like, man, I don't know where I want to be in 10 years. Like, what are some questions, some tips, things that you did in order to like get pretty clear on that piece, the long-term vision?
Yeah, I think the first, I'll say this to that, and then I'll give you a couple of things. One, I think we as humans are scared to dream sometimes. We're scared to say, I want, especially as believers, right? Like, I want X, Y, or Z, especially if it has some type of monetary value to it.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that overcoming that is the first piece of that. I'm not saying this has to be a monetary thing, right? But then I think the practical steps to that is like, one, this has to challenge you and scare you a little bit. If it doesn't make your stomach a little queasy, honestly, you're not thinking big enough, right? It should scare you a little bit, not a lot, but it should scare you to be like, can I do that? Like, because you have to push yourself a little bit. And the reason you have to do that then, as part of the other piece, is like, then pushing yourself then allows you to sit in those moments of questioning of, man, do I really want to do this? Oh yeah, I said I'm going to do, you know what I mean? And it gives you that motivation in those moments. Right? Like, I always think of, like an MMA fighter, right? Or somebody who's does that. And they literally train all day, every day for possibly 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
In the limelight. Nobody sees what they do any other time but those 20 minutes. Right? Like, so in those moments where nobody's watching, that's where then you have to break those things down from a vision standpoint and say, man, this is my goal. Right. And it's got to scare you, I think, is the number one. The second thing I would say to that then is there has to be, this is where I said there's a level, it still has to be realistic, right? if I came out and I said, I want to have $1 billion in the bank, is that realistic for me? Like, probably not. Right. And I think you have to have a level of realism when you're setting that goal, the 10-year target. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I would say to that is you've got to then share that with people that you trust. You've got to share it. If you're married, you have to share with your spouse. If you have a small group, if you have a couple people that you're really tight with, you've got to start saying it in those spaces, because when you start telling that to people that you trust, a couple things happen. Number one, the more that you say it, you've already written it down, which is a huge piece. But the more you start saying it to somebody else, the more your mind starts to believe that you can achieve it and that you're going to do it. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be in the NBA in 10 years. I'm going to be in the NBA in 10 years. I'm going to be in the NBA in 10 years. I can say it to myself and believe it. But when I start telling everybody around me, that's where I'm going to be and that's what I'm going to do, you start to believe that internally. Yeah. Right. And that's the key then to that. That's why it has to scare you a little bit, because it's got to push you farther than you're wanting to go right now so that you can then achieve whatever it is that you want. That thing can change, right? Yeah. But if you're not going to push yourself, you're not going to go outside of, hey, yeah, that'd be cool to get to the NBA in 10 years. You're probably not going to get there.
Right. Yeah, that's some great steps right there. So sharing it with somebody, doing something that's outside your comfort zone, something that scares you a little bit, but also that is realistic. So starting there. The thing, and you mentioned this, but I think all of these things, bringing God into this dreaming process too, I feel like is such a cool thing that we get to do as believers. So I would say, like when you're dreaming, make sure you're dreaming with God, asking him, what is it that you're putting in my heart to do? What is the fire that you're placing in my belly? Like, what's your mission that I can join you in? And then, because sometimes people are so far that way that they don't plan at all. They don't like to be specific because they're like, no, it's just wherever God leads me. And we want to be led by the Lord. And that's why it's like, bring him into this process. But I think also from that process, from hanging out with him and getting his dream and his vision, then get very specific and get an actual vision that's tangible that you can go after. So I feel like with all of these things, as we're saying them, it's like, how can you bring God into this process? I think is a huge thing that we can do as believers too. So, okay, so you got your 10-year vision. So then from there, are you doing a 3-year vision? Is that the next step?
Yeah, the simplest step of that, right? Then you're going to a 3-year. There's other pieces in there, but you have a 3-year plan, right? And then this is the fun part. This is so dream state, right? Like, again, if you take my son as the example, and you guys can do this too, right? Like, you sit there and you go, okay, 10 years I want to be in the NBA, right? It's a real tangible example. So let's just use that. Then in 3 years, like you start to dream, what does my life look like in 3 years to achieve that 10-year target, right? Mm-hmm. And you're just starting to write down and say, okay, in 3 years to be in the NBA, I have to be on varsity or JV. I have to be be able to run a mile at this time. I have to be able to have good grades so I don't get benched. I have to be able to have good friends around me, right? Like, and you start to picture in your mind's eye what your life needs to look like, right? Yeah. Not has to, what it needs to look like. And you're writing it down. And the reason that's so important, right? Here's the practical side of that, the mindset side of that. As soon as you write it down, you put that into the universe, the multiverse, as my kids would say to Spider-Man, right? You put that out there, right? The ability for your mind, like we said before, to believe and achieve that just increased more than 10x by simply writing it down and putting it out there, right? So vision casting into your heart, like you were saying too, and looking at what that has to look like is so key to ever achieving that 10-year target, right? Because if you don't do that, then you said you're going to do the same thing. You're going to flounder. Those days that you don't want to get out of bed and do something, guess what? You're not going to get up out of bed and do it. You're not going to do the little things to discipline yourself, right? Because your mind and your body don't believe or see what it can look like on the path to wherever you're going.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Which I think that's what's so cool about this kind of just step-by-step thing is you're just breaking it down piece by piece. You start with the 10, you move to the 3. The 3 then becomes more tangible. Even for me now, when I think about the 3-year, sometimes that's kind of hard. But then when it's in the context of a 10-year and you already have that baseline vision, it actually becomes a lot easier. Like you said, with your son's example, it's like, oh, this is where I'm trying to go. And in 3 years, I'm going to be in high school. Man, I gotta be ready to hit, to hit it hard in high school. Yeah. So that's where the 3-year gets fun is you're doing it in context of the 10-year. It becomes more tangible. You can kind of grasp it a little more. So we got those. Let's talk then about kind of getting into the 90-day rhythm from here. Because this is where money's made.
It totally is, man. Like this is where, like you talked about in the book, right? The book's called Traction, right? Like one of the things I tell clients, I tell my kids, I tell everybody, like you can have a great vision, right? But vision without traction is hallucination. As soon as you are unable to make that vision come to life, right? It's worthless, right? Like if we had a dream of anything, right? To build a massive water park. Hey, Jonathan, let's go build a massive water park. Oh, sweet, man. That's awesome. We have this great 2-hour conversation. What? We're never going to build it, right? You've got to then get the traction, right? That's where this 90-day world then is taking that. You have a 10, a 3, a 1, and then from that 1, you're taking it down 90 days, and you're saying, what are the most important things that get me to my goal? I've heard it said another way, to help me get a first down, right? You're not trying to score a touchdown right now. You're just trying to get a first down. What gets me a first down in the next 90 days towards my business, towards my health goal, towards my spiritual life? What is the thing I can do and control in the next 90-day window that helps me get there, right? And this is where, like you said, this is the traction. But the key still to this is that vision and that 10-year target, right? If you don't have that, because when you're then setting these goals, and I'll say one other thing on this too here in a second, about how many you should have and why it needs to be simple. But if you're not setting these goals, if you don't have that vision, you're not going to know what goals to set. And like you said, you're going to start having all these other things come at you, and you're not going to know how to prioritize things, right? But if you're sitting there and you're knowing, okay, my goal is to be in the NBA. So in the next 90 days, I need to pick better friends. I'm not saying this is what my son's was, but I need to pick better friends. I need to get healthier. I need to start working out more. I need to start studying more and having my grades on point. You make very different decisions in the short term that benefit your long term, right? And that's so important because we miss the fact of, like, take health, right? We can sit and we can eat a bag of potato chips. Doesn't seem like a big deal. Well, if you eat that bag of potato chips every single day, within a week or two, you're going to start feeling it, right? Within 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to start showing it, right? You can make these choices, but often or not, we don't have the vision in our life to say, man, I want to go there. I want to do that, right? Yeah. And God's gifted us with those things if we're, as you said, attuned to Him and listening to those things. And the other thing I'll say on that too, the whole saying of less is more, right? If 23 things are important, nothing's important. Same thing in this, right? Talking about life planning, talking about whatever. You got to have 3 to 7. Most of the time in a 90-day window, like we're talking about here, the traction, less is more. Have 3 things. Focus on 3 things that you know that you can accomplish. Okay? And you stay laser focused on those 3 things. And then the next month you do the next 3. And the next 3, right? And you start to stack those things up, right? And before you know it, you're halfway there and you're blowing yourself away and your life is completely different.
Well, that's exciting to me. When you have that clarity, then you know that you're living in line with what you want to become. We talk about this all the time. It's like, okay, if this is where you want to go, first of all, who do you need to become in order to be that person is a great question to ask yourself. If I want to be a leader of a business. If I want to be, if I want my business to grow and I want to have a big team under me, okay.
Yeah.
Who do I need to become a great leader? Because right now you might not be there, but if that's your goal, you need to figure out those steps in order to get there. Then, what do I need to do? What are the skills, the practical skills that I need to develop in order to get there? Who are, what are the relationships I need to invest in? You see how that can actually impact your process of making some of these goals. If I just pick random ones for 90 days, obviously there's benefit to it. But man, when you have that clarity of where you're going and then you figure out this is what I need to do, this is who I need to become, that's how I make my 90-day decisions. It's awesome. It's everything's in alignment with where you're going.
And you get a passion, right? Mm-hmm. Like you find what you love or what you really want to do, right? I was talking with a friend the other day. She's up in Virginia, and she was like, I like what I'm doing, but there's something more out there. She goes, how do I get there? Like, what can I do practically? She was talking about, she was trying to do the 90-day things.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's fantastic. And just like you're saying, like, you can do certain things, but what's your end goal? Mm-hmm. Like, where do you want to be? What job do you want to have? What career path do you want to take? Answer that, and then do the disciplines that you're trying to install, and you'll be able to then see greater fruit in your life, your career, whatever you're applying those things to.
Mm-hmm, for sure. One thing I can think of, a question people would ask, so I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is if that 10-year vision is really hard, if you don't know what you're passionate about, if you don't know exactly where you're going, and you could get hung up there for a while, it's like, man, this seems pretty overwhelming to come up with a 10-year vision. What would be some of your recommendations to just like make sure you're doing something to get started to figure that 10-year vision out? What would be some of your recommendations there?
Yeah, so I've seen a 10-year target or 10-year vision range anywhere from 3 years to 30 years.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be 10 years, right? Like it could be 1 year, right? Like whatever that goal is, if it's to run a marathon, right, is a great practical example. Or if it is to get your MBA. Well, it can be very practical in that aspect, and you can figure out those other things on the line. There's always something that we're striving for in some way, shape, or form, in my opinion, right? And so if you are taking your ability and you're saying, okay, I know I want to go somewhere other than where I am, and if your answer to that question is yes, okay, what's the next step to get where I want to go, even if I don't really know where that is yet?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Do I need to call Jonathan and pick his brain? Do I need to call Justin and see how he got to where he is? Do I need to you start to ask those other questions. And in the meantime, you're saying, okay, well, and you process and you pray and God's showing you the ways and these ideas and you're going, okay, well, I know that in the next 2 years, I need to go to school and do this, or I know that in the next 2 years, I need to hit the gym real hard, right? Like, and then after that 2 years, you set another one, right? Like, and maybe you have clarity within that 2 years and you can adjust it. So it doesn't have to be 10 years. The long answer for a simple question doesn't have to be 10 years.
Yep. No, that's a great answer. And I wanted to make sure we clarified that too, because sometimes that can feel overwhelming. And then what happens is you sit around for a year until you feel some sort of inspiration or passion. And this is what my life's work is going to be. And, a lot of guys are sitting in that spot, which leaves you paralyzed, not doing anything. And so having that, starting with some sort of vision, thinking about that, what's the change? And then I feel like usually we find our passion as we take action, right? Yeah. Like as you're starting to do things, you're never gonna know what you love to do or what you're passionate about if you're not doing anything. So start to get some movement. I heard an analogy where a guy was saying like, you're letting God drive, but you can't turn the wheel if it's just stuck in one spot. If you're not moving, it's really hard to course correct. If you're moving, and then you're still relying on the Lord and still taking time to reflect, it's easier to then kind of make some adjustments if you have some motion. So I'm glad we kind of clarified that. But then a good practice to put in that place is, are you taking time to step back, reflect, dream big as you're moving? And then at some point, I think things are going to become more clear for you in the future, as you kind of are starting to do things and find what you really enjoy and what God's really lighting you on fire to do.
Can I share one more example on this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I have a buddy he's in Oregon now, but he went to high school together, had an addiction problem. We'll just say that, to some pretty serious drugs. Right. And this is before I knew about EOS, but the same principles apply. And he taught me this, right, as he was going through this. And I'll never forget this. We're sitting at a restaurant and he goes, you know what? All I know right now, like, he didn't know what he wanted in 10 years. He couldn't have answered that question. But he goes, all I know that right now is I don't want this. I don't want where I am. I don't want who I am.
Yeah. Right.
And he goes, all I know then to do is to find people that aren't me. Right. So it was a very practical, right, mindset of where, for him, he knew that he wanted something different than what he had. And he knew a very simple way to do that was to start surrounding himself, right, or yourself, with people or places or businesses, whoever it is, whatever that environment is for you, that are more like what you want to be, whether that's church, whether that's small group, whether that's a different job, whether that's, in his case, right, like people that weren't addicts, right, like to where he was less tempted, right? It put him in a better place. It just came to mind, and I think that's so practical because we have things in life, right, that are bigger than a business issue, right? Like we have things in our own lives that are seem daunting and carry all these heavy weights, and this can apply to that and allow us to find ways out of that, right? And it can be a short-term goal, right? That's our sole purpose because it's such an impactful thing or a detrimental thing in our life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a great example. And I think he still had a vision, right, for who he wanted to be, for what he wanted to get out of. So it still started with vision. And then he knew from that vision, I just need to hang out with other people. And then I'm sure as he did that and became like these other people, got freed from his addiction, the bigger picture started to open up more and more and more where you can then. So I think that's a great example. So guys, I want you to take that to heart. You do have some sort of vision right now. If you take time to think through that, just begin there. If the 10-year, if the 3 years too overwhelming, begin there and start to take action. And I think these things will open up as you go. Really good example. Thank you. So let's talk then now just about really the practicals of how you're taking your 90-day chunks. And now how are you organizing your weeks, your days, your schedule? How are you keeping those things in focus on a consistent basis?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm married. I have 5 kids. So my life,
a lot of hats,
dude, my life is pretty crazy. And I get the comment a lot, like, man, how do you do it? And like, I don't know if I ever think that. It's just, we do. Like, we have to then take that 90-day thing, like you're saying. And if we don't do that, right, like, practically speaking, I personally feel as though I'm not doing what I'm called to do as a believer, as a husband and a father, to love my kids, right? And to give them as much of me as I can. It's why I started my own business, because I was working stupid hours, right? And I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to be more involved in their life. And so I think the practicality of that then is I schedule my every single day, right? Like if you looked at my calendar, I think I showed this to you once, right? You take your morning, right? For me, 3 days a week, I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I hit the gym, come home, I pray, meditate, I do my positive intelligence stuff. I do my positive affirmations. It's 30 minutes of like personal me time before anybody in the house is up other than me and the dog, right? And then from that, I get the kids up, right? Get them out the door. They normally leave the house by 7:30, and then I'm getting ready for my day work-wise, and I'm working from like 8 to 3. And in my calendar then I have obviously my meetings, and I schedule that very particularly, right? My mornings for me is when I work the best. So I'm very, very, very strategic. My heavy work is in the mornings. If I have a super important meeting or a client meeting or something like that that is integral to my business, I will allow that in that space. Otherwise, I'm working on heavy things in my business. Then my afternoons traditionally are calls or coffees or things like that, where I'm a little less, sharp mentally possibly, but I'm still able to engage, but it doesn't quite need my heavy mind mental work. And then I put in my calendar every single day from 3 to 5. I block it out because I send calendars out all the time. And from 3 to 5, and it's called Family Transition.
Okay.
And this is it's a free space, right? But it gives me the opportunity when my kids walk in at 3 o'clock, right, from the bus, I can turn into dad mode instantly if I need to. Or I can schedule certain things within there, or they have a practice that pops up on the schedule, right? And the reason I do that is because when they come in, there's a really special time when they walk in the house. There's a 5, 10, 15-minute period right there where I can have a really special connection with them, right? And so blocking that out for me, it's less for other people and businesses. It's for me to know, okay, it's almost 3 o'clock, right? I need to wind down my day. I need to be ready for them to come in the door, right? And then after that 5 o'clock thing, if the dad bus hasn't already started, right? Like it's about to start. So it's dinner and it's hockey and it's cheer and it's basketball and it's you name it, right? And my goal in those moments, because I planned and structured my day so well, right? And there's one other thing I'll share here in a second. Because I did that so well, I'm able to then in those moments have a clear mind where I try. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, where I can have a better ability to engage with them, right? And say, hey, really, how was your day?
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, are you good? Like, what's going on? Did something happen at school? I can be more attuned to that. And here's the trick to that piece. Like rocks, right? It's 3 to 7 things. I try to keep it to 3 things every day that I line those out at that 8 o'clock time frame. It takes me about 5 minutes. What are the 3 most important things that I need to do today to move my business forward?
Yep.
Okay. If I accomplish those 3 things by noon, wipe my hands, I can be done. Right? That's not my wiring most of the time. Like occasionally when it's warmer, I'll go putt, chip, hit some golf balls, something like that. And I'll take a breath. But if I get those done, I then feel, even if mentally, like I've achieved, like you were saying before, you can do things and not feel like you get anywhere.
Yeah.
I've then achieved 3 things that I set out and I said, no, if I do these 3 things, today will be a success. And then at the end of the day, at 2:30 to 3, right before my kids get home, I then start to take that mindset to say, okay, what are the 3 things for tomorrow? Yeah. And I outlined those the night before. So I don't have to think about them, right? At night. Okay, what's tomorrow going to be? What's tomorrow going to be? When I'm sitting in the car at the pickup line, like, no, I can be dad, right? If a call comes in, that's fine. But I'm able to then be more focused, right, on those conversations and in those moments. Again, not saying I'm perfect, but it allows my mind, the way it works, to better engage with them, right? And my kids are 13, 12, 11, 8, and 6. So they're all over the board, right? Like, but I can engage with them at a different level, right? And be more in tune and be more present with them rather than, okay, I got to remember this tomorrow. I got to do that tomorrow, right? I've already done it, blocked it. It's done. I'll figure it out in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking about so many times people don't like to be so scheduled because it feels like it takes away their freedom. It takes away their spontaneity. That's definitely a perception and a thing that I hear a lot of times. And one thing that's just so cool about your life and what you're doing is you're scheduling things based on your priorities, right? So we know that you want to, first of all, love the Lord, have a great relationship with him. So that block is in there in the morning. I got my God time. it's in my schedule. Then I know second for you, you're a family guy. You want to invest in your wife and your kids. So you're strategically blocking out 3 to 5 and then the rest of the night for your family. Those things are already in there. So when I look at your calendar, I can see like, yeah, Justin actually follows through with what he says are the most important things in his life. They're literally in here. And I can see that you've organized your life in that way. So talk to somebody who would have that mindset. I know I've heard you say discipline equals freedom, which is counter to what a lot of times we think. But for somebody who thinks, man, that sounds really rigid, I don't know if I want every day to be so structured. How have you found that to actually be more of a freeing thing for you?
Yeah. So one, I would say I give credit to that phrase to Jocko Willink. So shout out to the book, Extreme Ownership. Fantastic book. And I would encourage anyone to go read it. And in reading that book and in the way that my life is structured, as we had kids, right, I knew that I had to change things, right? I never really knew what, right? But I was like, okay, we had 3 kids. Okay, well, I got to change things. Okay, we have 5 kids. Okay, right? Like you only have so much time in the day, right? And so when I tried it, because I was skeptical, I'll be honest. I was skeptical of the concept of, okay, if I over-discipline is what it felt like, my life, am I really going to see any kind of fruit from that? Okay? And here's what I would say is, if you're scared to do it, my honest opinion is you know that it's the right thing for you to do, right? Because you're scared because oftentimes you don't want to do it. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be easy. And I'm not saying you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
What I'm saying is you have to structure a life that is around your priorities, right? So you can get what you want out of life, right? The discipline aspects of that will give you then the freedom to take that vacation when you want to go, to take and go pick up your son from school on a Wednesday afternoon and take him to a Rockies game or a golf tournament or whatever, and have those moments because you disciplined your life, right? And you disciplined yourself. You can do those things. And then here's the other thing then that happens that we don't realize. When we start to do that and we start to stack those days of discipline on top of each other, we then start to attract people that want that same thing, right? Like you and I are very wired similar. We schedule our days very, very, very similarly, right? Like, but we started to connect because you get what I get and you're trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do, right? And that's where I think this opportunity to have this conversation is so key, right? Because we're scared to discipline ourselves. We're scared to say no to that extra dessert at Thanksgiving or say no to alcohol because it's the mainstream thing to do, right? Like, who cares? If you're truly in tune and you're saying, what do I want and what helps me get there? And you're having that mindset, the discipline part is the easy part, honestly, because your passion then is to say, man, yeah, drinking has really caused me to not be a very nice person. I need to get that out of my life. It is causing physical harm or whatever harm to people. I have to get rid of that. I need to discipline my life. I need to go to groups. I need to go find like-minded. Like, the discipline part is no brainer when you see the vision part of it. Right. And so, and that book for me too was part of that eye-opening thing of like, the way I do it, the way that you do it isn't how everyone has to do it. Right. Like, I love to go to CrossFit. Not everybody loves to go to CrossFit. My wife hates it. Right. She goes and does her own fitness thing. That's fantastic. Find what works for you. And perfect that. Right. And that's where then the discipline becomes the freedom. And you start to then do all these other things that you never thought you could do time-wise or life-wise or with people. Right. And your eyes, your scales almost drop from your eyes and you're just this whole other world that you never thought was possible is at your fingertips.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I love everything you're saying. I agree. And I've experienced that in my life as well. Is like, man, when you can really hone in and get the things done in the time you need to, then you actually have more time to do the things that you really care about. And a lot of times, like, man, if I'm so scheduled, I don't get to do the things. It's like, well, actually, if I'm all over the place and I waste time during my day and I don't know what I'm going to do and don't know where my life's headed, there's a lot of wasted time in there where it ends up actually stealing from the things that you say are important to you. It steals from the things that you enjoy doing. So anyway, I love all that. I want to close just with one question. So as a believer, as a Christ follower, like, how do you think your schedule and your vision, everything that we're talking about, the discipline, all these things, how does it honor God is my question to you. Like, how do you feel like doing these things is truly honoring to God? And why is that important to you?
I know that it honors God. And the reason that I know that is I can look myself in the mirror every day and blamelessly accept who I've become. And I can look in my children's eyes, and I can look in my wife's eyes, and I can see that I'm making a difference, right? Yeah. And I am trying, and it's not perfect. And there's definitely moments of failure, and there's moments of pain, but I look at them and I know that in my life, I have a very short window on this earth. Yeah. And you talk about vision, like God lays out a vision, right? As the head of my house, I'm called to care for my wife physically, mentally, and spiritually. Like, let that sink in. Like, I am spiritually responsible for her. For me to do that and to not try my best at that, in my opinion, is not God honoring. And this is how that lays out in my life for me, right? Like, the other thing I tell a lot of people is sometimes I feel like I have to do this because I have 5 kids and such a busy life. But I also tell people, is like, if I can do it and even do it, like what I would say is 25% well, right? Like, dude, everyone that's listening to this can do it. Like, you can do this, and you can do that. And the reason that it's so important is, honestly, it's biblical. God calls us to honor the temple, whether that's through physical exercise, whether that's through what we put into our body, whatever that is. Like, it's a value. It's a core value. If you go back to the VTO and the business side, it's a biblical core value for us to live our life to the best we can. It doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean that at all. It means to live our life every day. I love what James Clear says in Atomic Habits, 1% better every day. Yeah. Yeah. If I can live tomorrow 1% better than I did today, man, I did good. I did a better job. And then my hope is that my kids do it far better than I ever did. Yeah. Right. So long-winded answer, but it's like, I didn't cry. I thought I was going to cry, but like looking at my kids' eyes and knowing, okay, I'm doing the right thing by saying no to X, Y, or Z, so that I can ensure that I am more involved in their life in the next 10 years while they're here, is 100% the right answer for me. Yeah, man. Well, I love just hearing that. I'm proud of you for doing the work and taking the time. It's hard work to do that and to structure your life in a way that is honoring to the Lord and is doing your best for you and your family, being there for your kids. I mean, it's hard work to do that, but you've done it because you care enough about them. And so I love you. I honor you for that. As you were saying all that, I was thinking about a quote that I've heard from Mark Batterson, which is one of my favorites. He says that potential is God's gift to you. What we do with it is our gift back to God. And it's, so I'm just thinking of like, man, like God has given us this potential. He's given us responsibilities, and like, I need to do my best with that in order to honor God, to give it back to him. Like, so that's where this comes in, I think, for both of us, where it's like, man, this is important enough to me because I care enough to make the most of this life that the Lord has given to me and to love the people well that he's placed in my life. So
Anyway, thank you, man. I really appreciate the time today. Thanks for coming on the show. Tell us real quick, just if there's any business owners out there, anyone listening to this, like, how do we work with you? How do we support you in your new venture here as an EOS implementer?
Yeah, man. I am 100% accessible. So I do something a lot of people, in my opinion, don't seem to do. My cell number, 970-556-2348. Blow it up. It doesn't mean I'll answer you at 9 p.m., but blow it up. I'm available, business-wise, personal-wise. Find me on LinkedIn, and eosworldwide.com. I'm on there as well. That's part of the business side. And man, I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about what you're passionate about because you're passionate about it too, man. So I am humbled to be here, humbled to be on here. And I hope that whoever is listening to this is driving along or riding their bike or doing whatever they're doing and has some hope in their heart. And if we did that, man, we did 1% better today.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. Just honored to be your friend and to have this time with you. Respect you a lot. So thanks for the time. Thanks for listening to this, guys. Please go check out Justin's stuff. Reach out to him if there's any way that he can help you. And we'll see you next time. That's all I've got for this episode of the Intentional Man podcast. One thing that would really help both of us and new potential listeners is for you to share this show with others, post about it on social media, and leave a rating and review. Thanks for joining me today, and until next time, remember to build a life you're proud of by living intentionally.